The Torah begins at Shmini that when Aaron and his children were going to be installed as Kohanim, they had to bring certain korbanos on behalf of Aaron himself, on behalf of Klal Yisrael, to atone for the Chet Egel. And the Torah speaks about the specific species which Aaron brings and which Klal shall bring. One is for a chatos, a sin offering. One is a burnt offering. And the pasuk says, "Why must you bring these particular offerings?" Ki hayom Hashem nira alechem. Because today Hashem will appear to you, meaning the Shechina will enter into your midst. Until this moment, during the first 7 days, when Moshe officiated, the Shechina was not there. On the 8th day, the Shechina is going to enter. So therefore, you have to be fully atoned before the Shechina enters into your midst. So the pasuk afterwards says, Moshe says, this is what Hashem has commanded you to do, and you'll be qualified that the Kavod Hashem, the Shechina, should appear to you. So we just began the Orach Chaim HaKodesh yesterday, that he had said, the Rashi explains, means, it doesn't mean what you actually do, meaning when the korban, which represents you, will be brought, then you'll be qualified that the Kavod Hashem should come upon you. So just read it again, the Orach Chaim HaKodesh in Vov. This is what you must do. Rashi Pirish, ala krovas Aaron. It's referring to the korban that Aaron will bring on their behalf. It's something that seems to be they have to do. This is something that's being done on the behalf. It's not something they're doing personally. V'nireh. So the Orach Chaim HaKodesh explains what it means. It's referring to something which is about to be mentioned. The whole Edo, the whole congregation came close and they stood before Hashem. It doesn't say they stood before the Ol Moed. They stood before Hashem. And in addition, it wasn't necessary to say this. It says, Vayikhu el pnei Ol Moed. It says they were before the Ol Moed. El Yirtze Lomar. So what does it mean? This is what you must do. Shechinu atzmam be'erech hashlemus va'musko. They should prepare themselves within the context of perfecting themselves. We're speaking about spiritual perfection. Harochas amidosim shelifnei Hashem. Meaning they should be qualified as individuals in terms of their mindset, that they should be qualified to stand before Hashem. What is this? Hasogas tachas hashlemus, to achieve within yourself a level of spiritual perfection. Imaim David, what is that? Shevisi Hashem legdi somit. David speaks about his relation with Hashem. Kizelo yomut mimino shiat Torah, meaning that not for a moment is there any distraction, and your mindset is fully cognizant that you're standing in the presence of Hashem. That's the level of relationship you have. At this moment, nothing exists, only what's about to happen. We speak about the Shemona Esrei. We say Hashem Sosai Tiftoch Pi Agiti Losecho. The Gemara tells us in Brachos, what's the difference between Kriya Shema and the Shemona Esrei, the Amidah? Kriya Shema is a declaration of our belief. We're not having an audience with Hashem. Shemona Esrei, it's Kilu Oved Lifnei Melech. You're having an audience with Hashem. You stand before God Himself, before the King. When you stand before the King, and as we say in the Ani Mamins, the tenets of Jewish belief, that Hashem knows our actions, our thoughts, every nuance of our existence. And we stand before Him and our mind goes elsewhere. It's a total disrespect. When you stand before Hashem, nothing should exist except what you're experiencing at this moment. if you at that level, which is Shvisi Hashem Negdi Summit, and that's really what the Shemona Esrei should be. When you have the audience with Hashem, definitely it should be that. David was always 24/7, every moment of the day, it was Shvisi Hashem Negdi Summit. In the Amida, definitely it should be that. Your mind should be nowhere other than focused on what's taking place at this moment, not to think about other things other than the audience that you're having now. So David, Shvisi Hashem Negdi Summit, is continuous throughout his life. At least ourselves during the Amida, which is coming with the Melech, definitely it should be that. Even that we have difficulty with. And therefore we say, Hashem shall say, Tiftach fi yagiti losecho. We ask Hashem to give us the ability to speak his praises, because unless we're focused, we think about other things, it's only lip service. It's almost being two-faced. It's almost it is a disrespect. So we ask Hashem to give us the ability to focus that the words that come out of our mouth should truly be his praises. So Moshe is saying to Klal Yisrael, for you to be worthy, that you should be the receptacle for the Shechina, that you must bring about this level of perfection within yourself. This is the first Ramah in Shulchan Aruch. He's a person, every nuance, every movement, when you're in the presence of the king, you behave differently than when you're not in the presence of the king. So if the person understands that you're always in the presence of Hashem, you will behave appropriately at every level. When Moshe understood and he grasped what was necessary for Klal Yisrael to be the receptacles, to be worthy of the Shechina, this is what Hashem has commanded you to do. Pirish, Tziv Hashem shetasu also, shetiu tomid marichim b'daitechem katem omlim fnei Hashem. That you have to visualize within your minds that you stand for Hashem, and then v'yer aleichem kvar Hashem. And if you have that mindset, then you're worthy to be the location the Shechin should dwell upon you. You know, we say in Pirkei Avos, we started to study Pirkei Avos this week. It says that if you consider three things, you'll never sin. What is it? What are the three things? Da malo malo. You should always be cognizant of what's above you. What's above us? Ayin roa, a seeing eye. Ozen shomas, a listening ear. Chomasecho b'sev nechtovim. And all our actions are recorded in the ledger. If you are aware and cognizant of that continuously, you will never sin. You know what this means? It's da. If you know these three things, mala, what's above you, that Hashem is always aware of every aspect of your life. He sees ayin roa, oza shamas, chomasech b'sevin tovim, you're not going to sin. Because you have that level of cognizance. They have that level of attachment. But if your mind is elsewhere, you're not ready. Once you mention the name of Rabbi Yehuda Chosid, now Minig Ashkenaz, we say every Shabbos, Yikum Purkon. Yikum Purkon Mishmaya, Chidim Echista, we ask Rachme Ariche, we ask for all kinds of things, good health, children, eyesight. Why do we ask this on Shabbos? It's the Minig Ashkenaz. So Rabbi Yehuda Chosid, who's a Rishon, explains what is Shabbos. Shabbos is Mein Olam Haba. Shabbos, the Kedusha of Shabbos has a semblance of the world to come. What is the world to come? The world to come is that we have a relationship with Hashem. And because of the level of relationship, there's nothing which is comparable to that. That's the ultimate level. To have a relationship with the infinite. The only day of the week that Hashem enters into this existence, which sanctifies existence, is Shabbos, because Hashem enters into this existence, and that is the basis for the Kedusha Shabbos. For the Kedusha of Shabbos, there's a Toast in Shabbos, which we once studied, says, cites Yerushalmi, that Bekoshi hitiru l'hagid Shabbat Shalom on Shabbos. Chazal, with difficulty, allowed you to even say good Shabbos on Shabbos. Because since it's such a holy day, even to greet one another saying Shabbat Shalom, it's not appropriate. Because the Kedusha is so intense and overwhelming, and you're in God's presence. How do you distract yourself and say Shabbat Shalom to someone else? But the Koshi Tir, but they allowed one to do that. That's the Tosis in Ksubis cites Yerushalmi that normally when you purchase grain from an Amoritz, you have to retithe it. You have to tithe the wine. You have to take Meiser. Because an Amoritz cannot be trusted that he had tithed it. Even if he tells he tithed it, he may have not tithed it. What about if you bought grain from an Amoritz? It's called Demai, and you didn't tithe it before Shabbos. To do that rabbinical tithing, and you go to the Amoritz, to this person who's classified the Amoritz, and say, by the way, did you tithe it? And he tells you he did. Are you permitted to eat that produce on Shabbos? So Yerushalmi says you're permitted. The Halacha is permitted. So Yerushalmi says, why? Because even the Amoritz, who's not attuned as the person who's the Chavir, who's involved totally in Torah, will not say a lie on Shabbos. Yeah? Because even the Amoritz senses the Kedusha of Shabbos, that he's in the presence of God, he will not say an untruth. Therefore, if he tells you he tithed it, you're permitted to believe him, and you can eat it even though it wasn't retithed after you purchased it. That is Shabbos. So the Rabbi Yehuda Chassid says, if the king comes to your home and he walks into your home, which is the ultimate privilege, you should be ecstatic. And the person is sulking, or the person is distracted. So the king says, what's going on? Says, I got a business deal, A 2-bit nothing is happening in my life. King said, what are you talking about? If I'm here, everything else should be totally negated and non-existent. This is the ultimate. Everything means nothing compared to this moment. So when we enter Shabbos, we should be ecstatic because of the experience we're experiencing. We have the privilege. Hashem is with us. So how could a person not be happy and uplifted? How can we be burdened with all the worries of the week? They should be totally pushed out of our minds. That we don't is a claim against us. It's a level of disrespect. It's a disrespect for the Shechina. As a result of that, chas v'sholom, a person is deserving of what? To be punished. His health should be compromised. His eyesight should be compromised. His family should be compromised. Therefore, Chazal, they legislated this tefillah, Yukum Pum Mishmayo, that despite that, we're asking Hashem to have rachmim. That we're only mere mortals, we're not at that level, and he should understand, and despite that, he should have rachmanos on us. That's what we say Yukum Purkum. But again, it's not understanding what you're experiencing is a level of disrespect. So to be worthy that the Shechina should come upon you, and to be the receptacle, if your mindset is that you're always in the presence of Hashem, then you're worthy of the Shechina. But if you don't value it, because you're distracted and you have other priorities, as a result of that, you're not going to be worthy the Shechina should enter into your midst. You're not worthy, you're not qualified to be the receptacle. This is how the Orach Chaim HaKodesh is explaining, this is Zadavar. This is what you must do. Not talking about taking action, it's a mindset, it's within ourselves. He says, Chazal, he says, after I wrote this, I gave this explanation, he came upon a medrash, Zelashono, Ze'adover, Umahu Ze'adover. What does it mean, Ze'adover? Alamilo. It means circumcision. Come on, the Tema, Ze'adover Hashem Mol Yeshua. As we know, the Jews were not circumcised for 40 years in the desert. So when they came to eat the first Korban Pesach, after they hadn't brought it all the years in the desert, it says, this is what Yeshua did. He circumcised them. Adkan. He says, he says, the words of Medrash are not understandable. With Yeshua, we understand the Jews were not circumcised for 40 years. But Moshe Rabbeinu, the Jews here, they're circumcised. These are the Jews who left Egypt. Before they all left Egypt, they were circumcised. When they brought the Korban Pesach, Chibose Yom Moshe. This day, on the 8th day, did Moshe Rabbeinu have the Jews circumcised? He commanded them to be circumcised. So what does it mean? What does it mean, the circumcision? What does the medrash mean? We're talking about the covering of the heart. We're talking about the impurity of the heart. That covering of the heart separates us from ourselves and our Father in heaven. And when you have that covering, you don't have the reverence and the fear. He told you must remove that foreskin from your hearts. It was a year Lahem, quote Hashem. And only then the covenant Hashem, God's glory will come upon you. He says, and that's exactly what we're saying. That's what the Medrash means. The Milah doesn't mean the foreskin on the flesh. It's the foreskin on the heart. Like we have later in Dvorim, Hashem says, when the Mashiach will come, God will circumcise your hearts and the hearts of your children. And over there, the Ramban, we discussed many times, speaks about that evil will come to an end. Because the basis for all desire for things which are contrary to spirituality is the what? Is the sin of Deitz Adas. That will be purged from us. We will expunge it. That's the Milas Alev. That's the circumcision of the heart. Shul Bolio de Medrash Achad Yalkut. Zelishon came by another Medrash. Zelishon Zad Dover. Amalem Moshe Yisrael. Osa Yetzarah. Explicitly, that evil inclination. Ta'aviru melavavchem. Remove from your hearts. Vetiu kulchem b'yirachas. And as a result of that, you'll all be committed to that one level of fear and reverence. And the perspective will be the same perspective. L'shareis l'fnei hamokum. To you all, that you will be officiants before Hashem. You're dedicating your lives to serve God. Tiavodaschem yuchedes lefonav d'chsiv. Umaltem es orlas l'vavchem. It quotes the pasuk in Dvorim. V'masisim zeh. And if you do this, you remove the evil inclination from your hearts. V'yira lechem for Hashem ad kan ve'im dvoreinu atzma. That's exactly verbatim the way the Orach Chaim HaKadosh is explaining this. Malachim rules that, it's mentioned in the Gemara a number of times that Melech Shemot L'Kvodeinu and Kvod Mochel. A king is not permitted to wave his arm. It's a Torah law. And therefore, even a Navi, a prophet, when he comes before the king, he has to bow. The greatest Talmud Chacham in the world, when you come before the king, you have to bow. We read the Haftorah about Nosan and Navi, Nosan, the whole story with Bathsheba, with Shlomo, with David was aged, and the question of who's going to be David's successor. And he already announced that he's going to be his father's successor. And Nosan had advised Bathsheba she should come before the king. Bathsheba bows before David, and Nosan Hanavi bows before David, because that's what her demands. Understanding who the king is, you have to always display that level of reverence, always, because you always have to sense
Only
that
a Jewish king?
of what he represents.
Only a Jewish king?
But only a Jewish king.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, that's the idea. It's Avinu, no question. Understand that reality, but Malkeinu. And therefore you have to accord Hashem that honor which is necessary, and only then, as he says now, then you become worthy of that level of relationship. Torah, he speaks about who's qualified to be a Navi. A Navi, prophet. It's not enough to be a tzaddik. It's not enough to be a chosid. The Rambam says a Navi, there's not a moment in his life that he has a lapse of cognizance that he's always in the presence of Hashem. Always. If his mind should go elsewhere, that he does not sense that, he's not qualified to be a Navi. Even though a Navi doesn't prophesy continuously, a Navi, a prophet, could prophesy once in a lifetime. But to be classified as a Navi, that you should be a receptacle to receive that communication, you cannot have a lapse of cognizance, not for a moment in your life. And if you do, you're not qualified to be a Navi. And whatever you do is committed for his sake. That's what a Navi is. I'd once mentioned the story, phenomenal Rabbeinu Bachya, The Gemara tells a story, Rav Kahana, who originally was a student of Rav. He was a Babylonian. At Rav Kahana, there was a certain Jew who was an informer. And in that time, the Persians, they were the rulers in Bavel, in Babylon. And he would inform on Jews and they'd be killed. And an informer is considered a rodef. He deserves to be put to death. So Rav Kahana, being the leading Torah sage in Bavel, he summons this Jew who's an informer. He says, you realize, if you continue being an informer, we're going to kill you. So as soon as he says that to this Jew, he has a sense he's going immediately to report in Rav Kahana to the Persian authorities, and they're going to have him killed.
Yeah.
If that's the case, now Rav Kahana's life is in jeopardy. Rav Kahana immediately takes hold of this Jew, and he breaks his neck. He kills him. Because that's the halacha. One who rises to God to protect your life, you have an obligation to defend yourself, self-defense. And he kills this Jew. Being a state informer, government informer, he became a fugitive, Rav Kahana. They wanted posters throughout Bavel. Rav Kahana became a wanted man. He had to flee from Bavel. He went to Eretz Yisrael. And he comes to Shalayim. And Rav Kahana was the leading Torah sage at that time. Although he was relatively, compared to Rabbi Yochanan, a young man, comes to Shalayim. Who does he meet on the street? He meets Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish is the premier student of Rabbi Yochanan. He said, but when he left Bavel, even if a person has to kill someone, there's a principle known as Magal B'Chol Chayav. It still indicates something negative. Because what happened, he accepted upon himself to do tshuva that he will conceal his greatness in a public setting for 7 years. He will not reveal how great he is in his Torah. Silence. He meets Reish Lakish, which is only in a private setting, and he asks Reish Lakish, by the way, what are you studying in the Beis Medrash today? And he shares it with him. Rav Kahana enters into this Torah dialogue with him. Reish Lakish has never experienced anything like this in his life. He runs immediately to his Rebbe, Rabbi Yochanan, and he says to Rabbi Yochanan, Ari Olami Bavel. A lion has just descended from Bavel. We have a lion here. Rabbi Yochanan immediately invites him to come to the public shiur. And Rabbi Yochanan at that time was 140 years old. And he's very old, and he had very long eyelashes. He couldn't see. He could only see his students. They would take silver tongs and they would lift his eyelashes like he had like heavy lids. And when they would lift it, he'd be able to see. Otherwise, he couldn't see. His eyelids were weighted down. Okay, they invited him to the shiur, getting such accolades from Reish Lakish. They put him in the front row. Rabbi Yochanan is sitting on 7 pillows. And Rabbi Yochanan puts a question out to Rav Kahana. Rav Kahana doesn't respond. He's supposed to be this great Torah sage. He doesn't respond. Because Rav Kahana said he will not reveal who he is. They put him back a row. He asked another question. They put him back another row. By the end of the day, they put him back all 7 rows. Because he is committed not to reveal who he is. Ultimately, after being put back 7 rows, Rabbi Kahana says to himself, the 7 rows that I was put back, the level of embarrassment I had, those 7 rows are the equivalent of silence for 7 years. Therefore, I fulfilled my commitment. Now I'm going to reveal who I am to respond to the Torah conversation. So he says to Rabbi Yochanan, I'd like to start all over again. The first question he asked. He presents the first question, and Rabbi Yochanan says what he says. Rav Kahana refutes it. What Rabbi Yochanan says, they pull a pillow out from under Rabbi Yochanan. And after they finished asking all 7 questions, and he refutes them on every one of them, they pulled all 7 pillows out from under Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan is sitting on the ground. So Rabbi Yochanan has never seen anything like this. He's okay with it. So Rabbi Yochanan says, I'd like to see what this person looks like. So he asked his students to lift his eyelids that he should be able to see Rav Kahana. Rav Kahana had a defect of the lip. and it looked like he was smirking, but it wasn't. His lip had a deformity. He looked like he was smirking. And he looks at Rav Kana, and he sees Rav Kana, and it looks like he's smirking at him. And as a result of that, what does he do? It says he looks at him, and Rav Kana dies. He looked at him, and he died. They went and they buried Rav Kana in a cave. After they informed Rabbi Yochanan that when he saw him looking this way, he wasn't smirking, but rather he had this lip deformity. So Rabbi Yochanan says, if that's the case, I have to go be B'chai Mason. I have to resurrect him. So they go to the cave where Rav Kana is buried, and there's a serpent encircling the mouth of the cave. And he says to the serpent, slither away. The Rebbe wants to come see his student. The snake doesn't move. Then he says, snake, go away. Of course, a colleague wants to come to see his colleague. The snake doesn't move. Then he says, snake, slither away, because the Talmud, the student wants to come see his Rebbe. When he said that, the snake slithered away. He goes in and he resurrects Rabbi Yochanan. Rav Kana. Rav Kana is alive now. So Rabbeinu Bachya asks, this is in Parshas Balak. We know Bilam had an evil eye. A person has an evil eye, he looks at someone, God forbid, he could turn into a heap of ash, into a pile of bones. Rabbi Yochanan was the Holy of Holies. Every aspect of his being was Kodesh. What if he looked at him and he died? Did he give him did he zap him? So Rabbeinu Bachya explains that Rabbi Yochanan in his life never had a lapse of Torah thought. Never. In his life, never had a lapse of Torah thought. And because he thought that he was smirking at him, he felt bad. When he felt bad, he had a lapse of Torah thought. So because Rav Kana was the cause, it's not that Rabbi Yochanan caused him to die. Hashem took it. Because Rabbi Kana was the cause that Rabbi Yochanan should have that level of detachment, even for a moment. Therefore, Rabbi Kana deserved to be taken. That's Rabbeinu Bachya, how he explains the Gemara. So what's the level of attachment to be that receptacle for the Shechina? There should be not a lapse for a moment. This was Rabbi Yochanan's level. Rabbi Yochanan is the author of Yerushalmi, of the Jerusalem Talmud. You have to have a level of siyata d'shmaya to be that attached to such a degree that there's no distraction. Every moment, waking moment, even sleeping moment, you're committed, you're totally attached. Rav Hutner, Zech Tzaddik Levrocha, who was the Rosh Yeshiva Berlin, although he studied in Lithuanian yeshiva, he came from Warsaw. Warsaw was Poland, and Warsaw was the stronghold of the Hasidim in Warsaw. And initially, when he was a young man, before he went to Slobodka, one of the leading Torah sages in Poland, his name was Rav Yosef Engel. Rav Yosef Engel, he authored about 40 Svarim, Rav Yosef Engel. And he wanted to see, as a young man, how does a Torah sage look when he's sleeping? So he went and asked the attendant in Rav Yosef Engel's house. He would like to see, and it was known that he would take a nap for half an hour every afternoon on the couch in his study. And he'd like to see when a Godel B'Torah, Torah sage sleeps, how does he look when he's sleeping? When he's awake, of course, he's engaging in Torah conversation. How does he look when he's sleeping? So he goes in and he sees him sleeping there. And in his sleep, he's going like this, lying on the couch. That's what he's going on the couch. Alan, you would have given some medication. Okay? Meaning, even in his sleep, his mind was fully occupied in whatever he was occupied during his wake state. This is what a Gadol B'Torah is. Every moment, every fiber of his emotion, mind, intellect is always attached. There's never a moment of detachment. As the Gemara says, what you think about during the day, that's what you dream about at night. The Yom Moshe Laro, Kravel Mizbeach, Moshe's to Aaron. He's installing him now to officiate. Come close to Mizbeach Vasei, Es Hachatoska V'Sobosecho, and do your sin offering, your burnt offering, Chape Ba'atcho V'Arom, and you will atone for yourself and on behalf of the people. Vasei Es Korban Ha'om V'Chape Ba'adom. And then you will bring the sacrifice of the people, and you will atone on behalf of Kashitziv Hashem. He's saying to Aaron Krav, it's his famous Rashi, She'Aaron Bosh V'Yori Logeshes. Aaron was embarrassed. He felt unworthy, and he was afraid to approach the Mizbeach. Omalo Moshe, Lomar to Bosh. Moshe says to Aaron, why are you embarrassed? L'kach nivcharto. For this reason, you were chosen. So it seems to be only because he had this level of humility that he felt he was unworthy because of the sin that he had committed, being involved with the golden calf. Because he felt that level of unworthiness, that's why he was worthy. That was the basis for his worthiness. That's what he said. Loma tabosh lekach nivcharto. You have no reason to be mad. That's exactly why you were chosen, because you are this type of person. Eschatos egel ben boker, elosecho, ba'ayu. Okay. I'm going to skip a little bit. Just speaks about I'm going to skip the pasuk Chaf Aleph, Tes Chaf Aleph. Veisachozos, veishokayomin, the breasts and the right thigh, Heidif Aaron, Trufim Fnei Hashem. He waved it as a wave offering before Hashem, Kashisiv Moshe. Vayisa Aaron es Yodov. Aaron raised his hands, Elom vayivorchem, and he blessed them. Vayered me'asos es chachatos v'olav hashlomim, and he descended from doing, officiating the sin offering, the burnt offering, and the peace offering. Okay. So Rashi, what bracha did he give them? Birchas Kohanim, Yorecha Yoer Yiso. 3 brachas of Birchas Kohanim. Now this next Rashi is important. The other Moshe Aaron Moed, after he officiates, does all the service, says Moshe Aaron, they came into the old Moed, and they came out, they blessed the people, and then after they came out, God's glory came upon the people, and a fire came from before Hashem, a fire descended from heaven, and it consumed on the Mizbeach, the burnt offering, the fats, and all the people saw, and they called out, and they prostrated themselves. There's a famous Rashi over here. I mean, after Aaron officiates, does everything to the T, why all of a sudden say Moshe and Aaron, they went to the communion tent. And then they blessed, then the Shechina came. It seems to me there was some kind of delay over here. So Rashi himself, the other Moshe and Aaron, Loma nichnusu. Why did they go in? Matzos Parshas Miluim B'Braiso, and the Sefer Torah Kohanim. Loma nichnas Moshe im Aaron. Okay, 1 second. Skip Dover Acher, middle of the Rashi. Came with Aaron shekorvu kol korbanos. Aaron had seen that all the korbanos were sacrificed. V'nas kol hamasim, and whatever he was supposed to do, he did. Lo yord Shechina l'Yisrael, and the Shechina did not descend. He followed everything Moshe had said, as he said exactly, and the Shechina was supposed to come down, and it did not. He was pained. Aaron was pained, and he said to Moshe, Yodei ani shekoas HaKadosh Baruch Hu olai. I know that Hashem is angry with me. And I'm at fault because I'm not worthy. That's the reason why the Shechina did not come, did not descend. Moshe. So he says to his brother, Moshe Ochi, you did this to me, that I entered and I was embarrassed. Meaning, why did you do it to me? Moshe goes together with Aaron, they supplicate Hashem for mercy, and the Shechina comes. The Shechina descends. Okay? If you take a look in the Medrash, there were always murmurings against Moshe Rabbeinu. If you remember, I mentioned that after he brought the second set of tablets, he says to the people, we it's not enough. We're not fully reinstated. We have to build a Mishkan. And it entails this and this and this. The materials that he said to Moshe. And who's going to build the Mishkan? Who's going to oversee the Mishkan? So he says, B'tzal ben Uri ben Mat Yehuda, my great nephew, Miriam's grandson, he's going to build the Mishkan. So right away there were murmurings. What were the murmurings? Murmurings were, of course, he's the king. His brother's the high priest. His brother's children are the assistant priests, high priests. And now he's taken the rest of the glory for himself, for his great nephew. Could you imagine? The same old story. The nepotism. So Moshe explains to them, to be qualified to oversee the Mishkan, you have to be endowed with divine inspiration. You have to understand how the world, the letters of the alphabet conjugated and brought about creation. That's what the Mishkan is. So when he explained it to them, they said, oh, now we understand why we're not qualified and B'tzal is qualified. But Moshe had to give them an answer. They didn't take Moshe at face value. They had to understand why B'tzal and not them. So there's always this question of suspecting Moshe, there's something not right there. He's taking the whole pie for himself. Here, if you take a look in the Medrash, here they build the Mishkan. They're all excited. They're all told to prepare themselves, and everything after everything's said and done, it's a done. Nothing happens. They said to Moshe, Moshe, you wasted our time. Here we brought the wealth, we put it together, the artisans, everything, exactly as you instructed us. It's Rosh Chodesh Nisan. It's supposed to happen. It didn't happen. Moshe, what's going on? You hear this? They're not at peace with Moshe Rabbeinu. He goes in with Aaron. Now the Shechina comes down. But again, it doesn't really put it to rest. So why did it come down? They could say, Moshe forced the hand of Hashem. Didn't happen. Things don't happen by themselves. But it's really the will of Hashem. It should happen. So Hashem always leaves that slight opening that there's a basis to suspect Moshe Rabbeinu. And that was the challenge. That was the challenge. Eretz Zavos Cholavot Vosh, with the spies. After all you've seen, when we need spies, Hashem says it's the land that flows with milk and honey. Now, we want to see for ourselves. But Moshe said, in the name of Hashem, that's what it is. There was always this area of suspect. Maybe it's not. Maybe Moshe has his own agenda. And his agenda is not our agenda. And therefore they said, we want to see for ourselves. Hashem says, you want to see for ourselves, which is a lack of trust. You're going to get complicated. And ultimately, you people are not going in. You're not going into the promised land. You're going to wander for 40 years and die, and only the next generation is going in. And that's what happened here. So it's only after Moshe went in with Aaron and he was mispal for Rachmim, only then did Shechina come.
I mean, Rabbi.
1 second. Whenever there's a watershed moment, there's always a problem. For instance, right now, we're about to be reinstated. The Shechina is about to come. We find that by Yosef, when he brought Ephraim and Nasher to receive the bracha, what happened? there was a lapse of Shechina. Ephraim and Manasseh were they were grandchildren, they were about to become the tribes of Israel. Right? Ephraim and Manasseh grew machinery. What happens? All of a sudden, he says to Yosef, what's going on? I just had a lapse of Shechina. So what does it say? If you take a look, it says Yosef went and he was mispalel. He prayed that the Shechina should be reinstated, should come back to Yaakov to be able to bless them, that you should come to be able to be tribes. So whenever there's a question of Klal Yisrael advancing at a one-of-a-time level, there's always a kitchur, there's always a prosecution. There's always a prosecution. The Midas Adin comes into the picture immediately. So whenever Midas Adin comes, you have to supplicate Hashem for Midas around me. Yosef was mispalel, prayed. The Shechina came back to Yaakov, and then he gave him the bracha. Ephraim and Manasseh grew machinery. Ephraim and Manasseh assumed the status of tribes, although they were grandchildren. At this moment here, the objective of creation is about to happen. The Shechina is coming back to the terrestrial level. Midas Adin says, not so simple. For that you need Rachmim. Moshe had to be mispalel. The 40th year in the desert, all the generation of the spies died. We're in the 40th year, what happens? The Jews themselves, they have the crazy idea. Right? There's no water. He's not complaining about water now. When Miriam dies, this is the new generation. Moshe Rabbeinu speaks out of turn. He strikes the rock. He forfeits the right to go into Eretz Yisrael. So Moshe is not taken in. If there's a new era, then what happens? They start complaining about the man. And Hashem sends vipers to bite them. They start dying. After all you've seen, now all of a sudden you have a question with the man. This crazy idea comes to your head that you've been eating it all these years and it didn't leave your systems. It's expanding your systems, you're going to die. Again, this is part of the kitruk. That this was put in their minds that you should topple the apple cart because we're about to enter into Eretz Yisrael now,
Doctor.
which is ultimately the objective of creation. Always be the same. Chizkiyahu Melech was supposed to be Mashiach. Sadcher was supposed to be Gog Magog. What happens? Midas Adin comes with a claim. Chizkiyahu should not be Mashiach. Because he should have said Shira, he didn't say Shira. And Midas didn't want. Chizkiyahu was not Mashiach, and we're still dealing with all the issues till this moment. And Mashiach still hasn't come for that reason. Because whenever you have that transitional moment, which takes to another level, there's always a level of prosecution. Is what we call kitruk. That's the Midas Adin. Okay, we'll stop here with the Chumash. We'll see the halacha.